Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Marshall Black, and I'm a senior consultant with CDW Canada ServiceNow Solutions team. I've been with CDW about a year and a half, and I have over 35 years of IT operations and executive management experience. My focus at CDW is digital transformation and the customer experience. I'm joined here today by Edris Afzali, the Senior Engagement Manager for CDW Canada. Edris has been with CDW for 5 years and has over 20 years of IT service delivery and assurance experience, including 8 years of delivering large ServiceNow solutions to major customers, which is his current focus. Also joining us today is Elias Stamatopoulos from ServiceNow. Elias is a solution sales executive covering ServiceNow ITX workflows, including IT operations management, asset management, and business management. Today's session is being recorded and will be made available for later review and to share, and we've also allocated some time at the end for Q&A. So this is our theme for today as we walk through this virtual presentation in the discussion of IT operations and asset management. We all know the impact on our business and IT operations over the past 21 months. And digital transformation has accelerated with new associated risks and levels of complexity added to the age-old challenges of managing people, process, and technology. The challenges cross a sprawling and increasingly mobile and virtual landscape. As a business and IT leader, you're aware of this and more. And as the leader, it's important for you to have visibility across the asset lifecycle to manage resources to achieve operational predictability for your own panoramic landscape. We could say your goal is to simplify. How can you deliver faster innovation while ensuring security, quality, and reduced cost in this hybrid world? Legacy solutions and point solutions often cause IT to be made up of disjointed and fragmented tools, making it difficult to support the changing workplace efficiently and effectively. Point products add to complexity, resulting in high costs to manage and integrate, poor user interface, consistency, and they can't go fast enough for today's digital business. What we end up seeing is limited ability for IT to deliver modern services due to the management of legacy systems, poor integration between disparate data sources, processes, and tools, and too much time being spent on firefighting instead of delivering services. And also a lack of real-time visibility, making it nearly impossible to make informed decisions on how to improve. I'm going to take a few minutes now to introduce you to CDW and our ServiceNow practice, and then we'll get to the heart of today's session, where Elias and Edris will lead a review of ServiceNow, the trusted leader for our single platform for IT, and the way ServiceNow addresses the challenges we're facing today. Founded in Illinois in 1984, CDW is a company that has experienced continuous, sustainable growth through acquisition and commitment to customers. And it was through the acquisition of Micro Warehouse in 2003 that CDW entered the Canadian market. There have been several strategic acquisitions since that time, all targeted at growing the CDW solutions and services business. And the most recent being Serious Computer Solutions for $2.5 billion, which closed just last week and has yet to be added to this slide. With over 10,000 co-workers and almost 1,000 in Canada, CDW has extensive international operations, including North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia. And worldwide, with net sales of over $18 billion US in 2020, CDW was ranked number 161 in the Fortune 500, and importantly, number 3 in the Fortune 500 for IT services. With an extensive partner ecosystem, we're the leading IT solutions and services provider in Canada, integrating and managing technologies to help customers achieve their business objectives. And this extensive partner ecosystem, which gives us the highest level of technical and commercial support, combined with industry-leading in-house expertise, allows us to take on the most complex implementations and integrations. For many of these equipment manufacturers and software developers, we're their single largest partner. Back in 2013, CDW became a ServiceNow customer. And through to 2017, we had been contracting Aptris, a large and dedicated ServiceNow solutions integrator, for ServiceNow professional services to expand our use of the platform. By 2018, CDW was partnered in reselling Aptra services and successfully delivered over 100 high-quality projects. In 2019, CDW acquired Aptris in the USA and scaled our solutions in Canada to greatly expand our ServiceNow professional services offerings. More acquisitions of ServiceNow integrators and organic growth followed, to the point where we're now the ServiceNow Global Elite Partner of the Year for 2021. And to achieve Elite Partner status, a ServiceNow integrator must specialize in 5 or more ServiceNow products across the IT, employee experience, and customer service workflows, and must have established operations in multiple geographies. There are other criteria for selection, and among them is customer satisfaction. You can see here how we've been able to achieve year-over-year CSAT improvement as measured by ServiceNow through several methods, including direct interview with CDW customers. And note that in 2020, the scale was changed, but the results were the same. And we continue to make investments to meet or exceed the selection criteria and to grow this part of our business. You'll see here the ongoing growth of the CDW ServiceNow team of coworkers. And when this slide was prepared a few months ago, we expected to end the year with roughly 260 professionals in our ServiceNow team in North America. And I need to update this slide, in fact, because we're already nearing the 350 mark. We have several ways to work with our customers depending upon their needs, and we have the flexibility to create a custom arrangement if it's desired. Before I touch on them, I'll just say that we have a broad range of advisory services, including service and operations management, which are complementary to and typically ahead of our ServiceNow engagements. Through advisory services, we help our customers develop their overall service and operations management plans. In our engagements, we work with the customer to help them derive initial and continual realization of benefits from their ServiceNow investment. The project SOW, or the statement of work, covers the work we'll perform for a customer, and terms and conditions notwithstanding. Most important is the scope of the planned work. Our staff augmentation services are used by customers to smooth those inevitable bumps in demand while maintaining budget certainty. And post-implementation, our partnership approach allows us to participate in governance and continual service improvement programs, which deliver ongoing and accelerated returns for the customer. ServiceNow is not a fire and forget point solution. It's a platform that needs tending, but more importantly, it's a business enabler that can be exploited broadly. We encourage our customers to focus on being a superior owner-operator with ability to address important ServiceNow administration activities. And for those customers who don't want to take on those tasks, we have a managed services offering. CDW's broad range of product and professional services offerings revolve around the customer. ServiceNow will tell you their mission is to make work more meaningful and fulfilling for people around the world. And they'll also tell you they can accelerate the realization of benefits. We can attest to it, and we bring that into our own engagements. Our customers need a modern technology platform for business transformation that connects the enterprise with digital workflows across enterprise-wide use cases and provides a platform for building new applications that fuel innovation. They also need a trusted partner to be their expert guide, helping them quickly maximize the return on their ServiceNow investment. ServiceNow is not a throw-in for our business. It's a major service offering, and as such has accountability and support within our executive leadership team. We're committed to ServiceNow and to the success of our customers. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Elias and Edris, who can lead us in a discussion of ServiceNow and IT asset management. Thank you.
Thanks, Marshall. And it's always a pleasure to put on these webinars together with CDW. You guys are a great partner. So, here at ServiceNow, our motto is we make the world of work better for people. And ServiceNow delivers those digital workflows that create great experiences and unlock productivity. 24 months ago, I didn't think this would really resonate with a lot of people, but today I think it's more important to organizations than it ever was before, because this is really the future of work that we're working with today. Next slide. So ServiceNow is, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a high-level overview of what ServiceNow is for those people on the line that maybe are not ServiceNow customers today. ServiceNow is a digital platform for businesses. We were founded in 2004 and have over 13,000 global employees, and we're in a hyper-growth stage. We have over 1,500 global partners supporting our ecosystem with over 6,000 global enterprise customers. And most importantly, we have a 99% renewal rate, even through pandemic like we've gone through in the last 2 years. Our workflows have helped organizations streamline their processes and increase the satisfaction scores of their customers and employees alike. And this is important as organizations struggle to keep their talent and try to attract new employees into their ecosystem. Next slide. ServiceNow is a SaaS company with data centers across the globe. We have 2 data centers in Canada to support data sovereignty. And because we are a platform built in the cloud, we can have your organization really up and running as quickly as a few hours on your own dedicated ServiceNow instance. This means that there's no upfront costs to your organization to stand up infrastructure and weeks or months of IT teams internally trying to solution and onboard new technologies within your organization. So really you can get to value as quickly as possible. Next slide. So these workflows on the platform don't only cover IT, but they expand across the organization, across all BUs, to simplify work for all your employees with simple to use interfaces on your computer, on your mobile, or collaborative tools. We're really able to extend the information that people need to do their work and make it flow across all BUs, making the experience pleasurable for both employees and customers alike. Next slide. And it's these workflows that really help to break down those barriers between all these siloed systems within the organization that ultimately help to unite and integrate all these systems into a seamless workflow, giving the organization the customer and employee experiences that make them happy and focus on being productive instead of getting caught up in tasks that have really nothing to do with their jobs. Next slide. So I'm going to put up the safe harbor notice here, not really to protect anybody, but just to give you an insight into the fact that ServiceNow does invest quite a bit of money in the billions to update our products on a regular basis. And therefore, what you'll see today might change 3, 6, 9 months down the road as we add functionality to the platform. And ultimately, we always encourage our customers to relook at the solutions as you get closer to making a decision on whether you're going to purchase this in the future or not. Next slide. So today we'll be focusing on IT asset management. We will be talking about focusing really on IT asset management and those workflows. And you might be asking, what does this have to do with what we've just been talking about? Well, anybody that has been hired in an organization and has had to receive a new device has probably experienced that struggle to get everything just right for them, making sure that you have the right tools to do your job from the start of when you were actually brought onto an organization, or how you actually request these assets, and how the organization itself keeps track of these assets throughout their entire life cycle is very important, not only from an organizational perspective to reduce risk and cost, but also to provide a good experience for your employees. Next slide. So the agenda today that we're really going to be covering is IT asset management, really a general overview. We're going to dive a little bit into hardware asset management and software asset management. These are 2 of the biggest pillars within asset management. And we're also going to talk about getting visibility into these assets within your organization. Next slide. And as everybody knows, the last 24 months has been really challenging, and normal is not normal anymore. Everything's been turned upside down, and it's even more critical that we have a smarter way to workflow, as people in ServiceNow say that. And we've had a huge demand and uptake when it comes to asset management, just because of the fact that so many organizations in the last few years have had to transition from being on-site to almost moving their entire workforce remote, and not having that visibility and into where the assets are and into also what risk the organizations are actually taking on. Next slide. That's not only the end user compute devices that we talk about when we're talking about asset management, but we also talk about the infrastructure and software that you have in your data centers, as well as in the cloud. Typically, these are managed by different groups within the organization. They all use their own tools, and therefore collaboration is really hard between them, and that single pane of glass really goes away. You don't have visibility into everything asset management, and therefore increases risk to the organization. Next slide. So at ServiceNow, when we talk about asset management, there's really 4 pillars that we kind of bucket underneath our asset management suite. Hardware asset management, obviously managing all the hardware assets you have in the field, in your data centers. Software asset management, making sure that you have the proper entitlements for all the software that you have deployed into your organization, whether it be, on-prem, in your data centers or in the cloud. Also understanding and being able to manage the contracts and the warranties around all of these assets, as well as your cloud spend. And it's not only these verticals that we like to focus on, but it's the actual life cycle of these assets as they go through their entire life cycle. There's different stages and different workflows that need to be applied. And these automations are really what help keep that data really true, so you can report on it and have a good practice, ITAM practice, ultimately reducing the risk to the organization and gaining visibility across all assets throughout the organization. Next slide. So, what do a lot of customers do today that we've seen? A lot of them use disconnected tools. So they might be using a database, Excel spreadsheets, different procurement tools, and really all of these tools are very siloed. They don't work together. And there's even different teams that will manage different portions of the ITAM practice. A lot of the processes that are in place today in organizations are very manual. There might be a lot of emailing back and forth. Ultimately, this is causing a lot of human error, which relates to bad data, and ultimately reporting is a problem, which indicatively will add cost and risk to the organization from an ITAM perspective. Especially nowadays when people have mostly gone remote, understanding where those assets are, what data is on them, and how you can make sure that you're in compliance from not only from a software compliance, but also from a hardware audit perspective to reduce risk to your organization. Next slide. And so that's the state today, and what's wrong with that, right? So what's wrong with the status quo? Why do we have to change from our legacy tools to a platform that might be able to unite all this data? Well, ultimately, when you look at it, a lot of organizations that do work in that legacy point tool type system, Excel spreadsheets, emails, a lot of times, even if they built integrations, they're very brittle. They don't have that one CMDB. I always refer to HR as having that system of record for all employees in the organization. And then we look at IT, and they don't necessarily have that one centralized store for all their assets. It's always broken out into many silos. And a lot of times the teams that are managing hardware and software sometimes are different, and the communication between them might not be very vigorous. So therefore, it causes a lot of problems when you're talking about making that process flow throughout the organization and making sure that your data is good and that you can report on it properly. Next slide. So what is it that we try to do at ServiceNow? How are we going to try to help solve this problem? We try to use our enterprise platform to really connect the dots between all those different point tools. We try to get all the data into one repository and give you that single pane of glass across your entire ITAM practice. Not only that, but because you're on the same platform, we also can hook into your procurement backend tools to make sure that the workflows between all the different processes is automated on the platform, therefore ultimately reducing the amount of risk and cost to the organization by making sure that that data stays clean and being able to report on it properly. Next slide. So I'll take the next little while just to break down the different silos and how ServiceNow functions within these different verticals. So we'll talk about hardware asset management first. And this one's a really interesting one, actually, because, and I think this slide actually might even be a little bit outdated. So this slide I had prior to the pandemic, actually. So 21% of IT budgets roughly were being spent on hardware within the organization, I think it's pretty safe to say that organizations have increased their IT spend budget when it comes to hardware due to the fact that a lot of their employees are now working remotely and probably had to be provisioned additional assets to do their job properly. And when you think about it, a lot of organizations are managing this huge amount of spend in Excel spreadsheets and through emails and service tickets that are coming through. It doesn't make sense. Next slide. So when we think about those different pillars that they have within the organization currently, you can have intake through Excel, emails, phone calls. All of this data ultimately might go into a reporting engine, for example, even though the reporting engine is sitting on a different platform from where the actual data resides. Security teams are doing scans and bringing in data from other repositories that don't necessarily sync up with the hardware inventory repository. Software asset management is in a completely different tool. It's very isolated. All these tools are very isolated. Hardly any of them are hooked into your ERP systems from a contracting or a pricing perspective. So at the end of the day, what happens is it gives you very little visibility into the entire IT asset estate. There's a lot of manual work that happens when you start doing all of these processes manually. In the case of some software audits that people probably have to defend against, we're talking about months of man hours that are spent to organize this data and make sure you're in a state where you can attest to the actual software and make sure you're in compliance, even from a hardware perspective. Making sure that all these assets and the reports that you can provide to the vendors or even to internally your risk department or to your finance departments is correct takes up a lot of hours and really becomes an issue for an organization because they're so siloed. Next slide. So what we try to do at ServiceNow is by putting it all on the same platform, we're able to manage that life cycle of the hardware asset from end to end. So when we think about a new employee coming on board or an employee that already is there that needs to add some peripherals, how do they request this hardware? How easy is it for them to consume this hardware from the organization? So we take care of it from the request stage all the way through actually figuring out, do we have this inventory in any one of our stock rooms or do we have to go out and procure it? If we have to procure it, how do we automate that procurement process to make sure that all these tasks are being executed against, perform SLAs against them to make sure that all these metrics are actually happening and nobody gets left in the dust? People aren't waiting 3 weeks after they've been onboarded for their laptop. It happens a lot. Once the hardware is being procured, it's shipped to the facility where people are going to receive this asset. How do you get this asset into your IT system of record, right? By using our mobile capabilities, you're able to scan those assets directly into that CMDB to get real-time visibility into receiving that asset. You can even use that scanning capability at the employee end. So if the employee is being onboarded, but they're actually remote, how do you know that they actually got this hardware? So the employees can actually even use this capability to import data into your system of record for IT. And then what are the tasks that are created for the organization to make sure that this asset now is ready to deploy to that employee or to deploy to the data center? Those deployment tasks need to be tracked properly to make sure that that process is followed. So by automating those processes, it helps to avoid any type of deviation from any human error or somebody skipping out on the process. And then obviously this also integrates quite tightly into the IT service management suite that we have on the platform, which a lot of our customers do leverage. So anytime there's a problem with the device, an incident or a problem or a change is recorded against that device, you have a historical view into everything that's happening with that asset throughout its whole life cycle. We're able to make sure that these assets are inventoried properly within the different stock rooms. If you're transferring assets from one stock room to the other, you can do audits within those stock rooms to make sure that the assets are being tracked even when they're not actually assigned to people. We also bring in end of life, end of support data from a lot of the vendors so that you can plan your refreshes accordingly based off the data that we've collected and are able to present to you. all the way to disposal. So tracking that disposal of the asset and keeping track of that certificate of disposal. Next slide. And so how does this work on the platform? Really, like I said, it's right from the very start. The way people actually request for that hardware to be requested on their behalf. If the hardware doesn't exist in one of the actual stock rooms, we can hook into your procurement systems. We also have a method of discovering the hardware that's out in the environment and bringing that into the CMDB, as well as the traditional ways of importing spreadsheets, so that all the hardware is in the IT system of record, and then we enrich that with data that we've collected internally within ServiceNow around all the vendors, all the end of life, end of support. We enrich all those assets with all that data from our content service, and then we track the life cycle of that asset all the way through from request to disposal. And so this is all done on the same platform, that single pane of glass. You don't have to transition or move over to a different system in order to get this completed. And then when we talk about software asset management for organizations, so you're tracking the hardware out there, that's probably the first project people usually take on. But after you're tracking the hardware, how do you also track that software? Because a lot of organizations do spend a lot of money on software. They're audited regularly by their vendors. Also being able to visualize and realize any of the software that's out there that's not being utilized by your employees and being able to take that spend and pull it back, especially nowadays where the pandemic has really hit a lot of organizations and they need to save money. Software asset management is a great place to be able to pull spend back from these organizations and take those dollars and spend them somewhere else. So next slide. When we talk about software asset management, well, again, what's wrong with the way that we're doing it today, right? This is what I talk to a lot of customers about. And really, at the end of the day, when you're managing software asset management in these siloed tools, it becomes an issue. A lot of organizations are using Config Manager or Intune to inventory their software. But then when it comes to matching it against entitlements, it moves off to a different group, the vendor management maybe, or the ITAM group. They need to take these reports and then they need to sift through this data. It's a manual process, literally can take months. They don't get real-time visibility because by the time they sift through all the data, it's already a few weeks or a few months old. And then the vendors are always coming after them. And the longer it takes for them to produce these reports for the vendors, the more of a fire drill it becomes for them. And the easier it is for the vendors to realize that the actual customer they're going after actually has an issue with their license compliance and will therefore pursue that even more. And at the end of the day, the teams that are working on these are very siloed and they get very frustrated because they're being put under pressure. A lot of communication between one another is through email. Their inboxes are already full. And it's not a really pleasurable experience for them to be working on these types of projects. Next slide. So, from a software asset management perspective, again, we don't only track the entitlements for software, but we like to track the entire life cycle of that software. So again, from the request stage, people in the organization requesting software, how do they request that? We have that service portal to give them that shopping cart Apple look and feel so that they're able to request software. But not only are they able to request the software, we then understand the entitlements that the organization owns, so we can tell them whether or not we have the entitlement for them to consume and then deploy the software to their machines. We also have the ability to say, hey, you don't own the entitlements for this right now. We need to go out to procurement to procure additional licenses. And even put in workflows around approvals. A piece of software is expensive. We need to get a manager approval before we actually fulfill this request and send you the software. Being able to hook into deployment tools that you already have within your organization, such as SCCM, Config Manager, being able to automatically push that software to that end user's desktop so that you can then make sure that they actually get the software that they're requesting in a timely manner and not having to wait for any human intervention. Being able to track that software. So we, again, just like hardware asset management, from a software asset management perspective, we enrich the data. So we're able to normalize the software titles that you have in your environment. And then we enrich it with end of life, end of support from the vendors, and which ultimately helps your security practice expose any vulnerabilities to any of the software that perhaps is not supported by the vendor anymore, is not being patched anymore, and therefore an initiative needs to be kicked off from the organization to get rid of that software and upgrade it to a newer version. And from a support perspective, having the ability to see what's actually installed on those machines. Think about the scenarios where people have a broken laptop and they want to get a new laptop. Even being able to transfer the entitlements from that one laptop to the other laptop, and doing that automatically as you're swapping out the hardware within the organization, so that the ITAM team managing the software asset management practice doesn't have to worry about those workflows actually being followed by the teams that are actually configuring these devices. And then from a service perspective, anytime you have a change in the environment, especially in the infrastructure side, a lot of organizations will increase the amount of processors on a server, for example. But the people that are actually implementing these changes have no visibility into the software entitlements that they have on that actual server. And by increasing, let's say, the cores on that server, you might be actually incurring a huge expense to the organization, because some of the software is very expensive. And so having visibility into that entitlement that's required to make that change at the time of that change going to cab, for example, could be very insightful and can help those people make those decisions a lot more proactively and have visibility into how it's going to ultimately affect the organization. And again, by bringing in, doing software rationalization, bringing in all the end-of-life support into the platform based off of the software that we've discovered in your environment, we're able to align, even from an enterprise architecture perspective, which software should be upgraded, making sure that you have enough lead time so that those projects can be put in place, especially for a lot of those large enterprise applications that are deployed in the organization. And ultimately, like any SAM practice, the one thing that we always want to do is save money. So optimizing that software spend to mitigate compliance and risk to the organization is key. And in order to do that, you need to make sure that you have good data, you're reporting against it properly, you understand your entitlements, and also be able to detect where software might be underutilized in order to make maximum benefit of this money that you're spending on software within the organization. Next slide. So how does SAM work on the platform? Similarly to HAM, but there's a very different process when it comes to software asset management. So obviously we can still hook into those procurement systems from a procurement way to make sure that the software is being procured, and obviously those actuals are brought into the system. We also have the ability to discover software in the environment, either by using any on-premises tools that you're using to deploy the software, or you can leverage even our own discovery tools. And very importantly, we also hook into a lot of the cloud solutions that are out there. And quite honestly, this is probably the first place that a lot of organizations tackle, because this is where a lot of the benefits can be reaped very quickly from deploying a solution like this. And we're able to bring in all that raw inventory, normalize it. If anybody on the line is from an asset management team, they would understand that normalizing that data that they get from those third-party tools in the organization, they might be given a spreadsheet with 30,000 lines in which they need to consolidate down to maybe a few hundred different software titles that they're tracking. We do that automatically on the actual platform. We also provide that content service to be able to do that normalization, but also to bring in end-of-life, end-of-support data so that that's surfaced up at the same time. And then we understand the licenses that you've procured in order to make sure that A, are you in compliance? And if you're in compliance, is there any other actions we can take as far as, is there software that has low usage? Is there any reconciliation or revocation we can do within the organizations to gain actual savings today? And even put yourself in a position to be in a good position when it does come to maybe perhaps a software audit down the road. Next slide. And underlying both of these practices really at the end of the day is data. It's very important, and having visibility into this data is key. So if you go to the next slide, we have on the platform our discovery tools, but we also can hook into other IT asset connections System Center, Titanium, Jamf, whole bunch of different third-party systems as well as APIs. And what we really do at the end of the day is we bring in all the data from these different sources into that core IT system of record that can be shared across the entire platform and all the workflows. We identify all that hardware and software, and that's in the organization. We reconcile it to make sure that the data source is authoritative and the attributes are actually correct within the CMDB in real time. We deduplicate it because you have so many different sources that can be used to bring data into the platform. We have mechanisms to deduplicate that information to make sure that you're reporting on the correct assets, and then do any kind of reclassification to make sure that, are there any upgrades, downgrades available for the software? Are they in the correct branches within the CMDB so that when you do report against it, your reports are really accurate and really clean and can be leveraged for audits or for any type of internal audits from a hardware perspective or even from a software perspective. Next slide. So when you bring all three of those concepts together, as well as being able to pull in all the contract and warranty information from your ITAM practice into that single pane of glass, we're really able to facilitate that entire IT asset management system and the life cycles that all of those components go through within one platform. Being able to do it on one platform is beneficial because all the workflows that are behind the scenes that automate all the processes that are probably very manual today give you the ability to make sure that those processes are being followed. And if they're being followed, the data that's being put into the system is a lot more accurately represented in that IT system of record, which ultimately allows you to report on it better and give you a much better handle on your IT asset estate. Next slide. So I have a couple of customer reference slides here. I know CDW has a bunch of customers that they've also done HAM and SAM practices for. Community Health is one of those organizations where they have quite a few number of employees in quite a few different locations. They were able to leverage our SAM product for their software asset management, and literally were able to save millions because of the fact that their software spend was so overgrown, and they didn't have the ability to really find out who was actually using software in the organization and who wasn't really utilizing that software. So being able to pull back licenses, their normalization grew also to 98%. So what does this mean? This means that they were able to produce reports to the vendors that were coming after them from an audit perspective and really be able to provide definitive reports that were auditable from that vendor, and therefore ultimately saving them a lot of money and also saving them a lot of time when it came to defending against those types of software audits. Next slide.
Elias, if I can actually jump in here just to add in. Sorry guys, this is Edris. I know I've been very quiet here. I love hearing Elias's voice. Him and I work together very often. So, but really from the CDW standpoint, in terms of customers that we've worked with, we recently implemented for Region of Peel. They're one of the customers that actually allow us to use their name. So public sector account and looking at IT asset management, we're growing their maturity level. So it's a continuing engagement. We started with IT service management and IT operation management. We started with baseline foundational work for asset management, and we're transitioning into the full-on software asset management and hardware asset management model. And we're seeing similar returns. The one thing to take into account here is that we don't want to boil the ocean right away. This is a commitment that you're looking at planning out 6 months per module, if you want to look at it that way. Some modules can take less than 6 months, maybe 3 to 4 months to complete. It all depends on the work, or the scope of work, I should say. But really, what they're getting out of this is not only full visibility to contracts and procurement, and then in turn, software licenses and how they're being utilized and if they're in compliance, in addition to their assets and what is being distributed, what they have in stock rooms and how they're managing that. But this all ties into your employee lifecycle management. You're hiring new people. Okay, well, this person's coming on board. They're a business analyst. They need, this specific laptop, they need an additional monitor, they need some consumables, a headset, keyboard, mouse, webcam. And all of this is automated through the onboarding workflow within ServiceNow, and it writes to everything that Elias has shared with us. All of these products that have been shared, software asset management and hardware asset management, come into play. So it's not just the onboarding piece either. So you've automated that. Things are very efficient and straightforward, and there's no second guessing. There's no, okay, we'll update this Excel sheet. Everything is being done and managed within the platform. But what if that person now transfers from one department to the next? Well, we have all of these entries within the single system of record. So therefore, when we do this transfer, that also is automated because we build into the platform. If you're a business analyst, here's what you're entitled to. However, if you transition into a different role, a project manager, or you move up to a senior manager role, here's the delta. You need these software licenses, you need this hardware, and we can reclaim what you're not using. All of that is something that we're building in for Region of Peel and what we typically do for our customers. And then in the end state, for attrition, if anyone's leaving, we have an offboarding process. So we know what we need to reclaim. That includes both hardware and software. And that all goes back into the system to be reused, specifically around the licenses, but even so around the hardware assets. So keep in mind, this is a small piece of the larger puzzle, but when you start to look at the big picture, you see where you have to start and what your end state would really look like. Thank you, Elias.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, thanks for that as well, Idris. I think I have one more customer use case that I just want to kind of mention. And this one is from Toyota. So I know this one says a Toyota Australia, but it was a global project. They were able to actually see three-month ROI on their investment. And this only came from the software side of things. Since this slide came out, actually, they have come on to hardware asset management as well. And it was amazing to see them use hardware asset management for managing a lot of the cell phone devices that they were providing to their employees. How many employees would be either returning, not returning the asset, the cell phones that they were being provided, but also because they have a huge delivery network. A lot of the people that were being contracted from those delivery networks were actually just given the SIMs. And a lot of times when they were off-board, they would never return those SIMs. And when it doesn't sound like a lot because the SIMs aren't very expensive, but this, when you talk about Toyota worldwide, would be tens of thousands of SIMs not returned every year at a cost, I think, of like $10 or $20 for those SIMs. So the costs become astronomical when you start to add them all up. And that was just from a cell phone perspective. Like, so when they start to roll this out for the rest of their hardware fleet as well, I'm sure they're going to see additional returns and savings from there as well. So the ROI on these products for a lot of organizations is actually very quick, as opposed to usually ROIs are like within the years, first year or 2 years of actually deploying a product. Like Edris said, you know, I've seen some hand products being stood up for customers within even just a few months. And so the return on your investment is a lot quicker because you don't have shelfware sitting to get configured and deployed into your environment. It gets up and it gets running really quickly, and therefore you can start seeing the returns from implementing these automations and process and visibility into your assets, whether they're hardware or software in your environment. Therefore, ultimately giving you a better ROI because you can get up and running a lot quicker. So that's kind of what I had. I don't know, Marshall, do we have a slide after this one? I think it just might be Q&A. Yeah, Q&A. So we did leave some time at the end of the presentation for anybody in the webinar that might have had some questions that they might have wanted to throw out there. We're more than happy to answer any of those questions that you may have. And if there's any follow-up anybody wants.
Elias and Edris, it's Marshall. I'm having some difficulty seeing the chat stream. So if you would be so kind as to watch for some questions, please.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm seeing one here that says, does asset discovery require agents to be installed on servers or other devices?
That's a great question. So we have the ability to do it very many ways. We have many ways to slice that. We do have an agent that can be installed in order to inventory that device, both from understanding what hardware might be there as well as what software might be there. Most organizations will use that agent in a DMZ type location where security is very strict, or if the assets are not within the organization. So a lot of people are using the agent for people that took devices home because it can communicate over the internet through a secure channel back to the instance. We do have the ability also to do an agentless discovery, which is set up within the data center, for example, that can inventory all the hardware and software that runs on that hardware within the data centers, really understanding even from the base hardware, the hypervisors, all the way up to the application level and all the connectivity between them. We're also able to bring in third-party systems. So hooking into information like Config Manager or Intune or SolarWinds in order to understand any of the devices that might be in any of those remote locations where an agent might not be installed and maybe on a subnet, maybe where discovery cannot breach. So we have many ways of actually discovering both hardware and software within organizations. I hope that answered that question.
And also, Renee, regarding the chat, I think Elias and I are not seeing the questions that are being asked. So I believe we're going to have to rely on you as the host to relay the questions, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting these ones privately, but yeah, if everyone would like to just ask the questions and make it visible to everyone, that way everyone can see the questions. But I do have another that does ask, does ServiceNow have data centers in Canada? And if yes, do they meet the protected B standard?
Great question. So we have 2 data centers in Canada, Calgary and Toronto. And I believe we just got protection B status. I don't have the person from the Fed team that can comment. I don't know, Luke, can you comment on that?
Yeah, so we do meet the protected B standard as per the federal government. Yep. And we are listed on the GC Cloud SSC site.
Thanks, Luke. I think Chris Henry might have a hand up, maybe, or I think I see that.
Yeah, can you hear me, guys?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. Great presentation. Just a question around, from an IT asset management perspective, whether it be hardware or software, do you have examples of customers who've gone beyond and scaled to other asset categories to help their organization? Just for an example, office furniture, managing similar metadata around, let's say, quantity of office chairs, location, that kind of thing. Has the Now platform, from your perspective, been seen to manage other types of assets outside of the IT spectrum?
Yeah, so great question. So currently, I know the title says IT asset management, which is a little bit deceiving because within the CMDB, you are able to extend the classes to bring in additional assets. Typical requests I hear are like, projectors or like you said, chairs, because those are very mobile, right? And do go missing because they're expensive, right? So I have customers that have extended the CMDB to include additional asset classes. The workflows underneath pretty much are the same. The life cycle might be a little bit different, but I know that I believe, and that's where I have that forward-looking statement up. I believe come San Diego or Tokyo release, we are actually going to be formally extending it out to enterprise asset management to track everything, air conditioners, like AC units, all different types of stuff. That will be the official release of the enterprise asset management SKU. But to your question, I have seen people extend the classes out of the CMDB to support things outside of IT today. And there's nothing wrong with doing that.
It's very insightful. Thank you for the forward-looking statement.
Yeah, sorry.
And the reason I asked the question is I'm sure a lot of our colleagues here in enabling our remote workers, we've lent out and, let's say, allowed employees to borrow these types of assets, right? And we're tracking them as you said, in spreadsheets and disparate tools. So all the better to have it in one common repository.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's an excellent point. I never even thought about that because I didn't actually take advantage of any of those perks. When I already had a desk and a chair at home, so I never took advantage of it. But I'm sure there are people that have definitely taken advantage of that.
Oh yeah, we had a whole service where you curbside pickup for your office chair, and we delivered to the employee at the door.
Well, I don't know so during the presentation I actually commented a customer that I've been recently talking to. A lot of the onboarding they're doing doesn't actually happen in the office anymore. And how many organizations have onboarded new employees virtually? Like, I think everybody. And how do you know that the courier service that you've hired actually delivered that asset to that person, especially when that person doesn't even have a corporate email, right? So it becomes an issue because it might be weeks before they actually get that corporate email. Maybe the device is sent to them before their even official start date. So they've been able to leverage some of the mobile capabilities in order to ensure, by sending an email to that user's Gmail account, because they don't even have a corporate email address yet, to ensure that when they receive that asset, they're able to use, for example, the mobile capability to scan that asset into the CMDB, or even reply to the email and have that workflow kick off some of the underlying workflows within hardware asset management.
Hey, Elias, it's Gino here. Just one other quick thing to note too is, I don't know if we really touched on this, but any supporting documentation, any run books, any recovery procedures could also be tagged as an attribute as part of an asset. We worked with clients where they've had, business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans, and they want to tag to an actual asset, or they want them managed as an actual asset. And we do that through actually the CMDB. And then when these things change, these documents change, they are also changed. The status of these also change in the CMDB via the change management process. So I think that's also important to note too, that, supporting documentation can also be consumed in the CMDB.
Yeah, tied to the asset.
Yeah.
Even the contracts or the warranties that are imported with those assets. All the contract and warranty management, all those documentations can be attached to that asset, which becomes important when you think about the service desk, right? I call in because I spilled my coffee on my laptop. It'd be good if the service desk knew that the contract was almost up or the warranty had expired on that asset, right? Or if it still had warranty, right? So all that information is surfaced right in front of that service desk person's eyes so that they can action appropriately without having to, again, email somebody in procurement, wait for a response, 3 days goes by. It's not a good experience when you go down that path.
And when you're vetting any of those contracts or support documents through a CAB or a change advisory type board, you're able to identify all the people and all the different processes and departments this may impact by this change and who needs to be notified of this change.
100%.
Okay.
I do have one more team. So how is ITAM licensed, per device or IP address or something like that? Question mark.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that question probably would want to be raised with one of the sales reps, but ultimately hardware asset management is licensed by device. It's a little bit more complicated than that because it depends on the type of device. There's different variations, but it's by a device count. And then software asset management also is from a device count as well. We call it subscription units at ServiceNow. So there's a ratio that goes with it, if you will. But licensing can be a 3-hour conversation. And we only have 3 minutes left.
Renee, I'm assuming that's the end of the questions?
Yes, that's all the questions that I had on my end. And I don't see any others in the chat.
I always encourage people, you know, if you have a CDW rep, reach out to your CDW rep, you know, to ask these type of questions. They're always more than happy to field them. They'll involve us from ServiceNow whenever needed, to make sure that your answers all get your questions all get answered.
Thanks, Elias. And thank you to everybody today for giving us some of your time and participating in this interesting discussion. As I mentioned at the beginning, this session has been recorded, so it will be made available to you. And we encourage you that if you have any questions, please reach out to your CDW account executive or to myself, Fedris, or Elias. And on behalf of CDW and ServiceNow, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Marshall.
Thanks, everyone.